Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and we're doing another Forbidden Music. And I'm going back to a classically forbidden well with the Eagles album Hotel California. And today I decided to do a track that is partly inspired by the one that I did for the $10 patrons, which is David Bowie's Stay off of Station to Station. Today we're doing Life in the Fast Lane. And as always, with the, as you can see, written by Joe Walsh, Don Henley, Glenn Frey, lead vocals Don Henley, lead guitar Joe Walsh, clavinets Glenn Frey. And this was apparently inspired by a drug dealer Glenn Frey was hanging with. The story is on the History of the Eagles Part 1, which is a great movie. It's definitely worth checking out. And they are driving somewhere in California, and the next thing they know, they're doing like 100 miles an hour on the highway, holding big time. And Glenn Frey's getting worried, and he's like, what the hell are you doing? And the guy just looks at him and goes, "Life in the fast lane." And the moment he said it, Glenn is like, "Now there's a song title." And it sure was. It comes out of Joe Walsh doing a guitar exercise. Is a Joe Walsh guitar exercise he was doing. And the band members heard it and went, wait, what's that? Play that again. Let's make something out of that. And Joe's like, sure, okay, hell yeah. Let's see what we can make. Sonically, and I'm going to talk about sonically, even though you only get to hear snippets of it on a Forbidden Music track. Watch what this does in meter. The Eagles did a very well-controlled sound in their heyday, and this was them at their absolute peak. So it's got all of the things that you would expect from the Eagles. Among them, it's got a extremely controlled drum sound, but Don Henley is not a heavy player. So his thing is essentially timing. It's having everything flow just right. There have always been drummers who have been able to really lean into that particular distinction. For instance, your louder players are like Keith Moon, John Bonham, so on and so forth. But you've also got, say, Lee Van Helm from the band, who was not a heavy player at all. But he described what he was doing as like, well, you got to just kind of dance the beat along. And the band really exemplified that. Well, the Eagles exemplify that in a way as well. Don Henley always had a thing going on where the flow of where all the drum hits sat was just about perfect. It sat in the beat in a way that was sort of countrified. It was not a heavy rocker, but all of the little sounds sat just perfectly, and that was why he played them that way. And they also were very early on hot to put microphones in each and every single drum so that they control each and every single thing in the mix exactly the way they wanted it. And this is so normal these days that it doesn't seem unusual in any way. But back in the day, like they were working, their first couple of albums, they didn't have that kind of control because the guy they were working with for production had his own thing going on. He wanted like echo on the vocals, and he had a particular way of miking the drums. And if Don Henley went, "Could you put the microphone closer to the kick drum?" The guy would be like, "Could you hit the drum louder if you wanted to be louder?" And he just wasn't having any of it. And this is well after they had started working with, dear God, do they not have any credits for the engineering? Yes, they do. Credits for the engineering are down here. So they started working with Bill Simzik. And he's the guy that gave them all of the options for putting microphones in absolutely everything. And they basically ran with that. One of the other options I was going to go with was One of These Nights off of the album of the same name. But I'm pretty happy I picked this one because it does a beautiful example of something I could almost define that as a kind of hit record sound, even though you don't get to hear all of it. But it's where things balance that's really interesting. As you watch this play and hear the little snippets of it, hopefully you can make some sense out of the little snippets of it, but you'll notice that all of the drum attacks, the beats, are all hanging out in the top 6 dB of the peak energy meter. And we're looking at peaks. We're not looking at RMS with these meters. Then you'll find that all of the other sounds are sitting between 6 and 12 dB in a very well-organized way. Like, as the band plays and as everything is happening, our dramatic beats, our fundamental rhythm, everything that happens that's dramatic is peaking out as close to 0 as you can get, but it's all happening between 0 and 6 dB down, peak-wise. And then the body of all of the sounds and everything that happens that's a continuing sound is all hanging out between 6 dB down and 12 dB down. Now, in more open, sparse music or other tracks of theirs, like for instance Hotel California, we're talking 6 dB down to 18 dB down, a range of about 12 dB between the quietest and most open parts of the sound and the most intense kind of things. But with this one, this is meant to be a heavy rock track, and the Eagles couldn't really do heavy rock that well, but they did have Joe Walsh, and Glenn Frey wanted nothing more than to be a rock band, so they went as hard as they could. And the body of the sound is hanging out between 6 and 12 dB down consistently. The solidity of all the sounds combining together will fill up that space. And you'll also notice and probably be able to hear some. I remember in making this video, I noticed that fairly often you heard things like the harmony vocals kick in. They all sing Life in the Fast Lane. And one of the things you can notice there is that is also hanging out in the 6 to 12 dB down from clipping. When the voices kick in, you'll see a little block of audio on the meters. If you check and see that the top meter is showing it all as very bright, it's not actually going through to make the red spikes coming up from the bottom of the second meter and the top one. It's not doing that because it's far too well controlled, but it's all extremely bright because the voices are belting and projecting really, really hard. And that's the Eagles sound. It's about the voices. And I've done Old 55 on Forbidden before, and it shows a little bit, but this is the Hotel California album. This is where it really shows, where they really leaned in to going as hard as they could. And what you will notice in this sort of ultimate perfection of Eagles pop hit mastery, when they do that harmony vocal, it makes a little cloud of energy between 6 dB down and 12 dB down, and that's where the peaks for those voices hit. And it would be louder except for there has to be space for the drums to hit. And on the very bottom meter, DarkMeter, which is in all of the ConsoleX2, ConsoleH, and so on, you'll notice that the brightness of that little cloud, which on the top meter is red, this is overly bright, this is not optimal. But on the one on the bottom that does different colors for everything, you will see that zeroes in perfectly on a cyan shade. it's sort of the optimal, like you get to dial in on how belted harmony vocals are supposed to hit, because if it's that optimal, the blue dots on the top meter, that's a little softer. It's not quite, it doesn't go quite as hard. If you have a track from somewhere, like I've had a bunch of tracks from various directions, and some of them on the very bottom meter, they do white dots, and that represents the original Airwindows meter would be showing a bunch of red, either spikes or dots, but it would be showing like, this is all too bright, this is all very bright. And if you see a cloud of white dots on the very bottom meter, dark meter, that means also this is clearly very bright. Maybe you want it to be that bright. Maybe your idea is, let's have a batch of something that's extremely bright, extremely sparkly, make sure that we hear all the treble coming out, and that would do it. But for this example, it's extremely clear that all of the belted harmonies that make up this peak of Eagles pop record making, it all hits this very accurate cyan shade on the very bottom meter, which is something I certainly noticed a great deal. It's the kind of thing where it's like, that's very consistent. I guess dialing in this kind of sound, and they made sure they were dialing in the sound to be exactly the way they needed to. And the sales of the record speaks for itself. That noise is very successful noise. Here's how you balance it. Without further ado, life in the fast lane, and study it, and you'll hear little bits of it from time to time.
She was terminal. She held him up. Oh, he had a nasty mood. They said, they had bed. She said, only make you lose your. With me so far. Action, hot traction. The right people that do outrageous parties. Were lines on the beach. She pretended not to. Out till it was light. Too tired to fight up. Surely make you live in the fast lane. Life in the fast lane. Life in the fast took a turn. You can hear the engine. Haven't seen a guy. I think I'm who's coming, but you gotta shut down that freeway. They didn't care, they were life in the fast, life in the fast, life all the time. Fast lane, life in the fast lane.